Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great weekend. Firstly, I just want to apologize for not being on BookTube for a while. I haven't filmed in over a month. So recently, a few weeks ago, my twin sister and her partner were visiting, so I was just taking time with my sister. And then shortly after that, I got a sinus infection, so I wasn't really too motivated to be filming in front of the camera while I was sputtering and sneezing and congested. So apologies, but here I am. So anyways, the reason I am filming this video is because we are nearing the end of quarter one for Historathon 2023, which is a year-long reading event created by Bin over at Revenant Reads, and I will leave the details of the event down below if by now you're not familiar with it. So as we're nearing the second quarter, this quarter focuses on the years between AD 500 to AD 1500. So that is roughly the time period of the Middle Ages. So I am an avid amateur fan of the Middle Ages, particularly the High Middle Ages and Late Middle Ages in England and France. And I just wanted to share with you a few of my favorite books if you're wondering what you might want to read for the next quarter. I do have a lot here, and I think this is a good opportunity for film further videos on my favorite medieval biographies, biographies on women, retellings, sweeping narratives. But yeah, I'm just going to do what I originally intended and just shove a lot of books down your throat. So anyways, the first book that I want to share with you, and this is a hideous cover, I apologize, but The Greatest Traitor by Ian Mortimer. This cover does nothing for anyone, but this is a biography on Sir Roger Mortimer, who was the first Earl of March, and usurped the throne from King Edward II with Queen Isabella. You might know her as the She-Wolf of France. Between 1327 and 1330. And I really enjoyed this novel because Ian Mortimer, as a historian, has a really good way of getting into the medieval mind, and I think he did a good job of really trying to portray things from Roger Mortimer's side of the story rather than just, simply putting it down to him being a, greedy, a greedy man who just wanted to take the throne from Edward II, steal his wife, and, make sure that his son Edward III had no power. All of those things happened, but I think he at least made an attempt to try to understand what was going on in his head. So I really enjoyed that book for this reason. The next are all physical books, and in no particular order. If you're looking for a general sweeping narrative, Dan Jones is always great. This is his book called The Plantagenets. This is actually what really got me, into the Plantagenets. I'm fascinated in this dynasty. So they were the dynasty that ruled England once Henry II, who is a descendant of William the Conqueror, by the way. It's not completely separate. Once he took the throne of England until, the War of the Roses. So just fascinated by them, and he does a great job of, summarizing all of the different rulers and their immediate contemporaries in this book. And while we're on the topic of Dan Jones, this is his recent book called Powers and Thrones. This is magnificent. If you are new to the Middle Ages and you want the most concise, up-to-date narrative there is available. So we start with the fall of Rome and we end with, voyages to the New World here. So, and what I like about this is while it does mainly focus on Europe, there's a lot on the Arabs, the Arab influence during the Middle Ages, as well as the Mongols. And I feel like, while I'm not hugely read as others on the Middle Ages, I think perhaps the Mongols don't necessarily get a lot of attention, and I really enjoyed this for this reason. So next, we'll stick on general narratives here. The First Crusade by Thomas Asbridge. If you're not familiar with the Crusades and you want a good starting point, I thought this was excellent. And then also Roger Crowley, The Siege of Constantinople. This was also a great narrative of the Siege of Constantinople that ultimately led to it being conquered by Mehmet II and ultimately being known as Istanbul. And then we've got The Perfect Heresy by Stephen O'Shea. This is about the Cathar Heresy and the Albigensian Crusade in southern France during the 1200s. So if you're not familiar with the Albigensian Crusade, there was a sect called Catharism that was sprouting all over Europe, but seemed to be focused in the south of France. And there was a real attempt to stamp out this, all of my books fell over, sorry, to stamp out this heresy, as the church wanted to call it. So it was really a war against, between northern France and southern France, which had different languages at this time, different cultures. So it wasn't just, a war on religions. It was really a war on the people of southern France here. I thought this was a great narration. There's a lot of gruesome details in here, but that he doesn't shy away from Shea. But I think, he does a great job of also putting in some well-placed comic relief. So if you want to learn about the Albigensian Crusade, The Perfect Heresy is great. Next, these are all biographies. King of the North Wind by Claudia Gold, I thought was great. This is about Henry II, who I mentioned earlier. It's a very, it's not a very in-depth, critical analysis of Henry. It's more of a narration of events from his birth to, throughout his reign, the relationship that he had with his famous wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and all of his famous sons. You might be familiar with Richard the Lionheart, John Lackland. So I thought this was a great little narration of Henry II that I enjoyed. Again, another biography. This is also by Thomas Asbridge, who wrote The First Crusades that I just showed you. This is called The Greatest Knight, and this is a biography on William Marshall, who, is in the sphere of influence of Eleanor of Aquitaine, Henry II, all of his sons. He serves a lot of kings. He's got a very interesting life, and I think this is a great detail about one of history's most famous knights. And then this is earlier than the other books. This is early Middle Ages. This is The Dark Queens by Shelley Puhak, and I've made a lot of videos that feature this book in it. I think this is fantastic, very entertaining. This is about two Merovingian queens who managed to stay in power for decades in an age when men don't even manage to hang on to power and influence for a short amount of time. So it's a great look at their struggle, their relationship with one another, which is, to be quite frank, downright murderous, but also an examination of how cunning they were and how clever, and just a real fascinating look at two medieval queens during the Merovingian Empire. And then one which, I wouldn't necessarily give this a 5-star, maybe a 4-star. It's quite short, but I'll throw it in anyways. This is Catherine Pangonis's The Queens of Jerusalem. The reason I like this is because it is a look at all of the women who ruled in the Crusader states in the Middle Ages. So women in the Crusader states had a lot more influence and power than they did, say, in the Frankish kingdoms, so the likes of France and England. They could actually be, vessels not just mere vessels of transmitting power from one male to another, but also potentially be heirs to the thrones of these places themselves. So it's a look at the women who wielded power and influence in the Crusader states, or Outremer. Outremer? Anyways, that was a very brief, well, it wasn't brief at all, but that was a quick run through of some of the books that I think maybe if you're not familiar with anything in the Middle Ages and you want some good starting places, these are some great books to sink into. So anyways, I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, BookTube.